Chapter 31. You still Haven. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Davi was walking down the stairs, her eyes instantly fell into the rose that was already put in a plain black vase on top of the table. Its view was so beautiful, a single red rose in the middle of a large dull and black-gray sofa was looking so outrageously catchy. Looking at it, Davi smiled pleasantly, feeling extremely wowed. She then walked towards the table and stared at the rose while the masked man was quietly watching her across the table. "It's pretty," she said, and Say just agreed with her with a nod. "I'm glad you liked it. I'm actually getting nervous just now, afraid that you might have thrown it away." "Haha." Davi's voice was accompanied with a soft chuckle. Part of her words was obviously a joke, but Say's response made her partly speechless. "I won't throw it," he said. His voice, serious and firm. Davi doesn't know what to say. Does this person doesn't know how to deal with jokes as well? She could only clear her throat, then smiled at him while thinking deeply about something she should say. Thanks. But is this okay with you? I mean, putting a flower here. Is there a problem putting it there?" "Huh. No, nothing. But I thought you don't like colorful things. That's why." Davi almost couldn't answer him properly. She spoke hesitantly. And when her statement was followed by a long silence, Davi could only look at him and wait for his response, anxiously. Until finally, he opened his mouth. "As long as you like them, it's fine with me." Davi blinked 3 times. She was shocked. She wasn't prepared to hear those kind of words suddenly coming from this man of all people. It was the first time she heard words like those coming from his mouth. What's going on? Is he aware that his statement is somewhat flirty? When did this person who's uninterested in human beings learn to spew such cheesy pickup line? "Anyway, your personal study room is done," he continued as he stands. Davi haven't even recovered from the shock yet. And what? My personal study room. Davi's eyes turned wide as she slowly followed him towards another room just right after his restricted place. And the moment he opened the door, a spacious room with lots of books appeared in front of her. The room looks comfortable and it seems like everything she needed was already there, even computers and shelves were already arranged in a really convenient style. Davi was stunned. She looked at Say with a really bewildered face. "When did you?" she uttered. "Few hours ago." She can't believe it, but she realized this wouldn't really be that hard for someone like him to do at all. Davi was amazed, she almost wanted to cry. "Thank you," she uttered sincerely. Hearing a word of thanks from her, Say looked at her. "You still haven't asked me anything at all. You haven't even used that card I gave you." Hearing the words, he said, Davi was silenced. For some reason, the way he said it seemed sad, and she didn't know what to respond. She wanted to tell him that she doesn't need anything, that her brother's safety was the only thing she needs, and it's all what she was paying for. She wanted to say that him being so good to her was enough. However, she didn't speak. And seeing her unusual silence, Say just landed his hand in her head. "If you need or want anything, just tell me." Say's tone was serious, but to Davi, he almost feels like a lost Santa Claus suddenly asking her to just spell out her wish list. Ednel.co. That night, Davi spent her time inside her study room. She only came out for dinner and returned right away. Say also locked himself inside his cold dark room, making the house almost looks like no one was around. Until hours went by and Say finally closed his laptop. The clock hand exactly reached exact midnight. Say then went to their bedroom, but to his surprise, the bed was empty. Dark lines appeared in his forehead, then he turned and walked towards Davi's study room. The moment he reached the door, he pushed it open gently and silently. After a while his footsteps drew closer, then he stood by the side of the table. He breathed deep as he watched the sleeping girl. Her face was sticking with papers and books on top of her table. After watching her for a while, he moved closer to her, slowly carried her in his arms, and brought her out of the room gently as possible, like a princess. Chapter 32 Lesson You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sun was already out and streaming across the gray-toned bedroom when Davi opened her eyes. She felt like her eyes were heavy, so she spent some moment yawning and blinking, not realizing that she was hugging someone. The moment she decided to rise, her eyes turned wide and her sleeping nerves all jumped into chaos due to shock when she realized she's hugging Say with both her one arm and foot, an embarrassing position at least for her. Her heart instantly gone wild, but thinking that Say might still be asleep, she forced herself to calm down. She still couldn't move her head for she's afraid she might wake him up. So after taking a quiet deep breath, she started moving. She slowly removed her foot, then her arm, gently as she could. However, the moment she raised her head, she felt as though all her blood went up to her face. It was because Say was already wearing his mask, and that'll only means, he's already awake long time ago. Does that mean, he's waiting for me to wake up? Davi abruptly rose and straightened as she put some distance between them. And when she looked at the wall clock, her eyes widened as she stared at Say. You're leaving again today, right? She asked, partly panicked. Yes. Say's response caused Davi to tightly tug the blanket. Her face suddenly turned apologetic. I'm sorry, she uttered as she bit her lip. She knows that Say was always leaving early, yet it's already past 10 in the morning. Did he really waited for me to wake up? Why did he not wake me up? No, it's okay. I'm not rushing. Really? Yes. Hearing the man's reassurance, Davi finally smiled and sighed with relief. However, truth was that, Say was already awake an hour ago, and he woke up even later than the last time, causing him to finally conclude that this girl in his embrace was actually damned so contagious. He was aware they're late, but he already learned his lesson from last time, that Davi will wake up if he tried removing her hand or her feet. And thinking about her studying until late at night, he doesn't want to wake her up. Thus, he could only wait for her without moving until she wakes up. Not minding the guy at the other side of the door who was about to go nuts. When Davi stepped out of her room, the butler told her that the two already left, and that they'll be back tomorrow. Davi could only think that it was after all, her fault, but since she herself needs to go to Blue City again, she quickly wrapped up and leave the house as well. After a tiresome day, Davi went straight to the new luxurious apartment in Sky Town where her brother moved in after he was released in the hospital. It was actually the apartment that Mr. Chen was talking about when she's still in the hospital. The first time she went there, she couldn't believe it, so she tried talking to Mr. Chen about it, but the man told her the apartment was already under her name. The apartment was simply too much, her head aches just by thinking about the cost. However, she couldn't do a thing. She knows she has no right to refuse either, since it was already in the contract. The moment the door opened, Davi hugged her little brother right away, squeezing him like he was a white little pillow. Haru. I miss you, I miss you too, sis. Will you stay here tonight? Look here, I bought a hot pot for us. Let's have a feast, just the two of us. Haha. Wow, I love that. Brings back memories. Haha. You're right. Come. Let's do it fast. The two siblings then went to the kitchen and started cooking happily. They talked to each other as though they're best friends who was separated for years and was just given a chance to finally chat. Chapter 33 Kidnapped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, Say went back to Grey Mansion. He was already set to fly later at night, so he could only wait for Davi to come home and tell her that he'll be leaving for a while again. Upon entering the house, for some reason, Say went straight into the kitchen. And the moment he crossed the kitchen's door, his eyes fell straight towards the fridge. A lime-colored, square dot-shaped note was sticking in it. Wasting no time, Say took a stride towards the fridge. And in a brink of time, his long hand was now holding the note as he stared intently at it. Welcome back. I made a fruit juice for you, I hope you like it. Davi, just like yesterday's, a cute smiling heart was drawn at the end of her name. After staring at the note for a while, Say then opened the fridge and took the fruit juice. He stared at it for another while, as though he was again memorizing its every angle, then afterwards, he took it upstairs along with the love note. Meanwhile, Zaki, who was observing him the whole time, is having a good silent laugh deep within. Ever since Davi appeared, Say is starting to become human and it's cracking him up every single time. However, in a blink of an eye, the wide smile in his face instantly disappeared when he saw Say suddenly halted just in front of his study room while his gaze was directed to his phone. Feeling the instant drastic change of the atmosphere, as though the world just turned 360 degrees, Zaki abruptly walked towards him. Judging from Say's current expression, he could tell in one glance that an unexpected disaster has occurred. And it doesn't seem to be that simple at all. The moment he gotten close to him, he saw the secret message being flashed on the cell phone screen. The young miss is kidnapped. Zaki's eyes slowly turned wide. What? Are you serious? Who the hell dared kidnap her? And while she's being guarded by that brat? Is that even possible? Wait. Could it be? Get the car, now. Say's voice turned completely frozen, there's no trace of warmth in it at all. Seeing him switched back to his usual monster mode, Zaki instantly went serious as well. His vampire-looking face went as cold as Say's and his eyes were almost brimming with fire. After a short while, everyone was already inside a car speeding out of the mansion at full speed. To Blue Shark Port. Ryu, whose driving was shocked with the place that Say just uttered. He didn't get why, he was confused. Why are we going to the Master's secret base? Did he just say it wrong? But that's impossible, right? Looking at Ryu's confused expression, Zaki decided to enlighten him. Do you think anyone can take down that brat just like that? He asked, and by just that single question, it's already pretty suspicious. Ryu knew the capabilities of that brat, Eugene. He was one of the best even though he's young. If he's the one guarding, no one can touch the young miss as long as he won't drop his guard down. And the only person capable to lower Eugene's guard is definitely an ally, it's no other than Master alone. Now that you mention it. Hearing Zaki's explanation, Ryu thought that it is indeed the only thing that makes sense. It was impossible for a certain enemy to catch her or even get close to her without getting caught first by Say's absolute radar. However, he was still perplexed. What was the point of doing this? What does the Master want from her? But what was the Master trying to do? Chapter 34 Escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In a certain shabby and empty room, Davi was sweating as she struggles to remove the rope tied in her hand. The whole room where she was dead silent, but it was well lit. The window was opened and a warm breeze was making the white curtain dance. Davi kept on untying herself as fast as she can before anyone could enter. Minutes ago, she was just leisurely riding a taxi on her way back to Grey Mansion when suddenly, the driver said they had to take a detour. Davi instantly turned suspicious and was preparing to send an emergency call when she suddenly, for unknown reason, lost consciousness. And by the time she woke up, she was already tied in this empty room. Fortunately, the men who tied her didn't use any professional techniques whatsoever, and the rope they used also seemed nothing special. Well, seeing a fragile-looking porcelain-like young pretty lady made them go easy on her, thinking she was a doll-like princess who can only sit obediently in someone who can do nothing dangerous. After a short while, the rope was finally untied as her sweat was dripping in her face. She stood right away and checked the room, but the lone door was locked. Realizing that it's impossible to walk through the door, her gaze instantly shifted to the wide-opened window. A smile carved in her face as she approached it, excitingly. However, the moment she looked out of the window, the smile in her face faded. She was currently in the third floor, and the place where she's at surprised her. Endless containers were what appeared before her eyes, enveloping the whole port as large cargo ships were floating on the water. Where the hell is this? Wait, MKZK. The sign and logos carved on every container surprised her. Upon seeing it, she was now sure that this place is no other than the famous continent's largest and world's second largest shipping company owned by Mikazuki Group. But why am I here? Why did people here take me here? Why? Confused and perplexed, Davi shook her head to forget about her questions and just focus on how to escape. She then took a really deep breath, then searched for a less risky route for escape. Gladly, she saw a metal pipe. Upon seeing it, she wasted no time and prepared herself. She took the rope they used to tie her and tied her long hair with it. Afterwards, she started climbing down. She could only thank the gods that she was wearing jeans and T-shirt. However, she was wearing a heel, so she took it off and threw it out on the ground first. Deep within her, she was thankful she was agile and can climb like this. She was glad she joined a taekwondo club back in high school. Truth was that, Davi was supposed to be among the school's representative in various tournaments in and outside the country, if not for her part-time jobs and her frequent practice absences. Well, she wasn't really interested in competing, she just started joining the club to learn defending herself, but she ended up being surprisingly good with it that the coaches began to coax her to compete. She was physically agile and elastic as what her coaches told her, but her strength is still being considered as weak, thus she has to practice more. Sadly, she simply has no time for it, and could only give up on it for good. To her, it was already enough that she has learned a lot. BDNV halfway down the pipe, Davi was startled when she heard a voice coming from the room where she came from. She raised her head and a man in black was shouting from the window while anxiously looking at her. *T. The young lady is down there. Davi instantly went a bit panicked. Thankfully, she was already just a floor above the ground, so she jumped right away. As soon as she reached the ground, she ran away really fast, barefoot, without looking back. Leaving behind her red heels on the ground as two men in black started chasing her. Chapter 35, definitely the one you are listening at novelfull.audio. Meanwhile, the moment Sei and the others reached the luxurious underground base, a cloud of strength-sapping pressure enveloped the golden-toned large room. Causing even the commandos guarding the emperor-looking old man sitting in a golden chair, instantly went frigid. It was because Sei's current aura almost appeared as though he's arousing their instinct to defend for their lives, or else, they'll die without even knowing how. Looking at the sweats in his men's foreheads as they gripped their guns as though they already forgot that the blazing cold man before them was his precious grandson, the old man who was as cold looking as Sei cleared his throat, startling all his men to come back to their senses. Sei then walked straight in front of the old man sitting like a terrifying emperor. And as their eyes met, it was as if two polar vortexes were about to collide, emitting a deadly cold temperature, instantly turning almost all the old man's underlings felt sudden frost bites all over their body. To think that you actually came flying in a blink of an eye. Dear grandson, so this is the extent of your affection towards this girl, huh? Not bad, not bad. The old man seemed really pleased. His terrifying face went partly soft as soon as he talked. And his aura instantly went calm as a quiet breeze. However, Sei's expression and aura didn't change. "Where's she?" he asked with his usual ice-cold voice. "Oh, don't worry, she's resting in a good place." But of course, to make it realistic, they tied her lightly. For some reason, the old man was still obviously looking pleased. However, upon hearing him, Sei just turned his back and he moved towards the door, leaving the old man without a word. "Oh, not bad, not bad." The old man smiled as he signaled one of his men to bring Sei into the place where they kept her. He knows that this grandson of his doesn't tolerate any more jokes, and to anger him like this was already risky. Thankfully, he ordered his men to be gentle to her and to never touch her, or else he could have started a great war. "Zaki, you'll stay for a while. The old man's voice halted Zaki, who was about to close the door. And as soon as he heard him, an instant sour expression carved into his face as he looked at the back of Say, leaving him behind. However, he could only listen to the old man and stay, while crying inside without any tears. "What do you think?" the old man asked, and Zaki's shoulders could only drop as though he was already tired. "Ah, here we go again, this old man. Why am I the one you're asking? Damn it, I want to see Say's expression when he sees her. Let me go, please. I think, we're thinking the same thing, sire. Ha ha ha. We do. The risk was worth it. I was able to prove she's definitely the one. Ha ha ha." The old man laughed into his heart, content. As though he was delighted and relieved at the same time. "So you mean, it's fine to anger him as long as you will have your desired solid proof. Savage as usual, sire. Though, I think from now on he will include you, the last ally he trusted, to his enemy list under his radar. Ha. That's fine. I don't mind being under his watch. I'm already old, all I wish was a great-grandchild and a good wife for him, and I can already die happily." After the two chatted for a while, Zaki flew as fast as the wind toward Say's direction. Thankfully, after a short while of running like a bullet, he was about to catch up with him. Chapter 36. For the first time you are listening at novelfull.audio. In front of a large gate, Say was standing as a man in black was opening it. The gate was around 6 meters high and a thick razor wires covered the top of it, making it impossible for anyone to cross it single-handedly. The man then pushed the gate's door when two men in black, which obviously among the bodyguards, were lying on the ground, unconscious. Upon seeing them, lines on Say's forehead deepened as they entered the gate. And, they just took 5 steps past the gate when Say suddenly stopped. All of them could already tell that someone was behind. Ryu already turned his head back and his eyes were already turned wide the moment he saw a girl holding onto a metal pipe as she clung above the gate's door like a skilled ninja. Like gymnast. And the moment Say turned, she jumped right away and landed behind them. And upon landing, without even glancing at them, the girl ran out of the open door. She was like a swift wind, leaving Say and his men surprised and speechless. Say then glanced at the place where his wife hid herself just now and his face instantly darkened. He could tell that she just jumped from such dangerous height. And as soon as he returned his gaze towards his running wife, the air went unbelievably thick and his coldness reached its peak the moment he saw her running barefoot. At that same moment, Zaki, who was approaching with 2 men in black behind him, instantly halted Davi. Zaki was stunned upon seeing her. He didn't wear his mask, so he could only stop and looked at the panting girl, drenched with sweat and barefoot 3 meters away from him. Her beautiful hair was tied and messy. Zaki could only bit his lip as he sensed the dangerous wind coming from the man on the other side, 20 steps away from her. Davi was exhausted, and seeing another few men in front of her, she put her hands into her knees as she panted heavily. She looks tired and doesn't have any strength left. She was running for quite a long time now, figuring out the exit. What to do now? Davi was starting to lose hope. She knows that she has no strength to fight anymore, and there were just too many of them. Someone help me. She mumbled as she panted. And the first person that appeared inside her mind to call for help was no other than Say. She was surprised by the thought of it herself. However, at that moment, she realized how alone she was, that without Say, she has no one to even think of asking for help. That the only one she has in this life of hers was her little brother, and the only person whom she could ask for help was Say. Why, young miss? In the middle of her thoughts, a voice which appeared to be Ryu's, the man she first met at Grey Mansion, startled her. Davi instantly raised her head, and without wasting any time, she turned her head back. And what appeared in her eyes the next second, suddenly made her eyes felt hot. She suddenly wanted to cry. The masked man, Say, was there, her husband was standing right there looking at her. Say, she uttered. And at that moment, her voice was like a magical arrow that pierced off the tremendous frost surrounding the man across her, as if the arrow melted the surge of anger that was enveloping him. And hearing her called his name for the first time, he felt something indescribable within him, as if the words to describe it doesn't exist in this world to him. He then started moving closer to her. And seeing the man moving towards her, Davi was now sure it was really him and she's not dreaming. And at that moment, she didn't know why she suddenly felt emotional. So wasting no time, Davi then ran to meet him, and as soon as she got close to him, tears quietly fell from her eyes. She leaned her head right away into Say's chest and eventually hugged him tight, forgetting all the depressing thoughts running in her mind just a while ago. Chapter 37 The One Who Made Her Cry. You are listening at Novelfull.audio. In the middle of a large road surrounded by countless colorful containers, a masked man was caressing the hair of a crying girl in his arms. He seemed as though he was desperately trying to make her feel better, but it looks like he doesn't know what to do. Zaki, who was currently the master of reading Say's body language, was the most animated deep within. He was sure Say is currently being too anxious, and it was cracking him up simply because this was the first time Say ever acted like this. As though he was a father anxious to death on figuring out how to make his dearest baby stop from crying. Well, he was doing good, considering the fact that this is his first time doing so. Embracing her and caressing her like that was the perfect move a man should do. However, to Zaki, who was watching Say since they were young, it was surreal to see him showing such sympathy to anyone. He remembered that the last time Say embraced anyone was back when they were 10. Zaki was smiling as he looked at the two of them, however he knows it's still too early to celebrate. He knows that after all, things weren't that easy. And it never will. After some moment, Davi finally calmed down and started letting go of Say. She wipes her tears and looked at him. You came to rescue me, right? She asked, but the man seemed frozen and without a word, he just nodded. Davi somehow felt there's something different with him at the moment. But thinking, he was just worried, she decided to show him she's fine. She smiled brightly and talked to him again. Well, I'm so nervous, I thought no one will come to help me. But then, you suddenly appeared. Thank you. Her words were sweet and sincere. However, the masked man was again silent, and the next thing he did almost made Davi's heart stop. His long fingers suddenly wiped the remaining traces of tears in her face, gently as ever. And she didn't know why, but, the way he touched her face almost felt as though he was saying a really sincere and sad apology through it, as if he was the one who made her cry. The feeling, his gesture was just a bit extreme that it almost made Davi's heart twisted as she looked at him. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination, she wasn't sure if she's just thinking too much, however, she just couldn't stop herself from feeling that he was blaming himself. So she touched his hand, which was on her face, as she smiled brightly at him. I'm really fine, I think I'm just a bit too happy that you came, that's why. Haha. Davi's words wasn't a lie. The reason why she cried wasn't because she was scared, it was because Say really came and saved her. She couldn't believe he really appeared, and it caused her to tear up. Thankfully, after a few seconds of silence, the man finally talked. No, you're not, he said. Making Davi speechless for some moments. You're not fine at all, he repeated as he squatted in front of her. He touched her foot, then looked up. Lift. He ordered, and Davi could only do as he says. The moment she lifted her foot, Davi's instinct made her unconsciously crossed her hands and hugged herself. It was because Say's aura blazed with a seemingly intense anger the moment he saw how awful the bleedings in her feet. Chapter 38 Step number 11 You are listening at Novelfull.audio. Feeling the extremely suffocating and terrifying aura coming from him, Davi decided to try coaxing him. This is. It's because I left my heels when those men chased me and I jumped and ran recklessly. She bit her lip and couldn't continue talking. It was because the air surrounding Say went even colder. She was supposed to coax him, but it seems the effect was not good at all. And knowing it was senseless to lie to him, she couldn't think about anything else. After a while of silence, the masked man raised his head and his gaze fell straight into her hand. Still in his squatting position, he held her wrist. Then he lifted her fist, which was also bleeding a little. Noticing the bleeding in her knuckles, "Ah. This is because I punched those idiots," she continued as though she was a bit looking proud that she actually took down two of them through her signature magnificent and precise jaw kick. However, Say's silence made her felt that his negative atmosphere has no sign of subsiding at all. At that moment, her eyes were focused into his jet black hair while she's whacking her brain to find something that she could say to him. And unexpectedly, gazing at his hair made her remember something and an underlined note appeared in her head. Step number 11. Reflect his gestures. According to her great romantic advisor, the purpose of mirroring your man's gesture was to create a closer bond with him. And this trick was actually one among the few that was actually psychological. However, with the current situation, Davi's purpose in using this step was to make him feel better. She always felt warmed whenever he pats her head, so she wanted to do the same for him. She wanted him back to his usual calm demeanor. Thus, making this step a double-edged, if in case it did work. At that same moment, Davi then instantly switched into her mission mode. And the next second, she lifted her other hand and landed it on his head. The moment her hand touched his hair, Say instantly went motionless like stone, as if her hand was akin to King Midas' golden touch or Medusa's eyes. Davi, on the other hand, was suddenly smiling so wide as though she was overjoyed that she finally able to pet his head. Truth was that, Davi really liked it every time Say caresses her hair, and she always wanted to touch his hair as well. She always loved the warm feeling and his warm hand. However, at that moment, she doesn't know why the feeling when she's the one doing it to him seems different. She unexpectedly felt a fuzzy electrifying sensation as though he was a scary dark beast that has a really soft and cute silky black furs. She couldn't help but love. The supposed to be romantic caressing scenario turned out to be a cute petting scene. And she couldn't stop herself from petting him. Meanwhile, Say was currently frozen. His brain once again seemed to stop, this time, for a while longer. He doesn't know how to even react. And worse was that, the girl's eyes suddenly twinkled bright as ever as though she finally found her dream fuzzy pet. Say was confused, and the girl didn't stop from running her fingers into his hair, as though he already became a furry little dog in her eyes. Making his stunned face turn a bit darker because he couldn't even get angry at her despite it all. And he wanted to stop her, but seeing her face looking as though she was currently flying even higher than Cloud 9 made him waited for a while. He wanted to watch her ecstatic face for a little longer. And at that same moment, Say was being mystified, for her hand just felt a little too warm, as though tiny little white hands suddenly appeared within the dark void inside him, touching every corner as though they're trying to embrace the overwhelming solid darkness that no one has ever dared to even try reaching. As if they're hands of an angel, leaving sparks of warm tiny lights within him. Chapter 39. I Don't Hate I. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Say suddenly closed his eyes, then held the girl's wrist, stopping her from petting his hair. At that moment, Davi looked stunned, looking as though she just woke up from her warm fuzzy dream. However, not giving her any more chance to react, Say abruptly rose. And the next thing he did made her eyes widen. Say lifted her without any warning and carried her like a princess. Davi was shocked, but she sensed the sudden surge of coldness coming from him. She thought she might have had really overdid it this time. His sudden coldness made her thought he might not like the petting she just did. So while holding on to his neck, Davi leaned her head into his shoulder, looking as though the girl on Cloud 9 just now suddenly fell on the cold ground. For some reason, she suddenly felt sorry. When she wrote these steps on her note, Davi already expected them to not always work 100% and he might even end up disliking some of them. She expected the possibilities, however, now that it actually happened, she didn't know it actually felt indescribably disheartening. "I'm sorry," she uttered, causing Say to suddenly halt. "Why are you saying sorry?" he asked with a voice frozen cold. Davi felt a shiver down her spine as her eyes were locked on his sexy Adam's apple. Because. Davi's voice was sad and apologetic and nervous. Say instantly felt her emotion, so he breathed deep and he forced himself to suppress his inner darkness. Because I kept petting your head. When you didn't like it. She continued, and as soon as she heard the reason why she's suddenly apologizing, Say instantly loosened up and his terrifying aura instantly died down as he started walking again. You don't have to, I don't hate it. He responded, leaving Davi dumbfounded and mystified to the core. Then why did he suddenly felt really angry about something just now? Get the car, he ordered like an absolute dictator. And while Davi was busy brainstorming, Say was thinking deep. He didn't expect that she actually misunderstood him just now. He even scared her and made her apologize for something that wasn't her fault at all. And thinking about those, his darkness almost burst out of its cage again as though he was getting really angry on a certain someone, to the point that if Davi wasn't on his arms at that moment, something unthinkable might already have had happened. Until they finally entered inside a car. Upon sitting, Say talked right away as though he was in rush. To the hospital. Davi was surprised, no need. I can take care of this on my own. However, her protest didn't make the man budge this time. He was obviously anxious with her wound, so Davi could only agree with him in the end. City Hospital. Davi was on the disguised Zaki's back as they entered the hospital, leaving Say and Ryu in the car waiting for their return. And after a while, she was treated right away like someone very special. And in no time, it finally ended. She then hopped back to Mr. Chen's back, and on their way back to the car, Zaki started talking to her. Young miss, can I ask you something? He asked. How about we exchange questions? I'll answer yours and you'll answer mine. Speechless with her sudden negotiation, Zaki could only chuckle. Not bad. Haha, how clever. Okay, as long as you won't ask about the forbidden. I won't. Then, I'll go first. What do you think about the young master? I mean right now, how do you feel about him? Chapter 40 Maybe, Fate is Real. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The moment Davi heard his question, a short silence went by as her arm around his neck slightly tightened, causing the disguised Zaki to rethink about his question, even though an instant disappointed expression carved in his face, as though he was a paparazzi who just missed the perfect chance to get the scope of his supposed-to-be next epic headline. If it's too hard to answer right now, I'll just ask you another. No, it's fine, I'll answer it. Hearing her words, the light of the heavens returned into his face. And in an instant, he turned into a serious-looking father who was ready to listen to her beloved daughter's confession about her precious feelings to his soon-to-be son-in-law. He shut his mouth as he waited for the words she's about to say, intently. I haven't thought of it until now actually, but now that I think about it. Davi fell silent for another while and then, she continued. I admit, he still scares me occasionally, but lately I think I'm getting used to him. Of course, he still sends me shivers down my spine, but... It's strange, but... I felt like I don't want to get away from him, that whenever he was being scary like that, I wanted to get even closer to him and just pet him and just embrace him. It's not like I wanted to change him, I don't want to. He's scary, but... And of course, I'm wishing he could be softer and warmer too, but... When it comes to him being scary, I think I don't hate that side of him, even though it almost seems like it was the only side he has almost all of the time. And his silence, whenever he's quiet and all, lately, I think I'm pretty getting used to it as well. It's strange, but at first I thought I can never stand it, but now I think I don't hate the kind of silence between us after all. Haha. Was that weird? Not at all, he answered right away. TSK. This girl. You don't actually have any idea how wonderful you are you? Zaki was actually smiling wide as he listens to her sincere, warm and long statement. He even casually walked out of the elevator once they reached the third floor and took the stairs to gain more time to listen to her. And after his reply, Davi continued talking. I think all I want to do right now is stay beside him, I guess. And right now, he's no longer stranger to me. And, I think, the reason why I haven't felt any regret until now was because it was him. Maybe, no, I'm sure I was able to breathe again because it was him that I'm with right now. I was actually thinking things like, what if it's not him and someone else that I ended up with, that day? I asked myself that question for countless times, and I could only shake my head, and almost don't want to even think about it. Don't you think, that's just what they called fate? Zaki uttered. He was quite being drawn emotionally by her that he responded to her without realizing. And the moment he realized, he had no choice but to keep going. Well. Maybe, fate is real, after all. And you're one among its victims. Haha. You think so? I don't see myself as a victim though. At least as of now. Somehow, Davi smiled and laughed thinking about the idea of it. If fate was indeed the one responsible, if it is indeed real, then won't she need to give thanks to the god of fate? At that same moment, upon hearing the last part of her statement, even though Zaki mentioned the word a victim, in a good way, his gossiping side made him ask her again. Why? Did you think, you'll eventually become a victim in the future? Davi fell silent for a while. I don't really know. But, do you think Say will eventually turn me into a victim in the end? Is that your question to me? Ah. No, that question can wait for the near future, I have a much important question right now. Okay then, go ahead.